Ethan had a strange habit that everyone around him teased him for. He kept everything: texts, emails, screenshots, even tiny fragments of conversations. Most people thought it was paranoia, a leftover scar from an old breakup that had shaken him more than he admitted. But to Ethan, it was simply a way to stay grounded, a way to confirm that his memory wasn't betraying him. He never imagined this habit would become the only thing standing between him and the destruction of his career, his reputation, and his freedom. Because somewhere along the way, he fell in love with the wrong person. And that person, Madison, wasn't just manipulative. She was willing to twist the truth so violently that reality itself cracked around her. Ethan didn't know it yet, but the files he kept, those little pieces of digital evidence, would soon unravel a storm he never saw coming. When Ethan first started dating Madison, everything felt almost cinematic. She was charismatic, quick-witted, and always knew exactly what to say to make him feel seen. But slowly, subtle fractures began to appear beneath the surface of the relationship. It started with small disagreements, little things that shouldn't have mattered. Ethan would recall a conversation a certain way, and Madison would immediately correct him with an air of absolute certainty. "No, that's not what happened," she would say, her tone gentle but authoritative. "You always mix things up." At first, Ethan doubted himself. Maybe he really had forgotten the details. Maybe work stress was getting to him. But the more it happened, the more he noticed something unsettling. Madison never admitted to being wrong ever. Every argument, no matter how trivial, ended with Ethan questioning his own memory. Gaslighting didn't come all at once. It crept in quietly, like a slow leak that eventually floods the entire room. Madison would insist he said things he never said. She'd recount conversations that never happened. She'd react to something he supposedly did days earlier, only for Ethan to have no recollection at all. But instead of accusing her, he blamed himself. "Maybe I'm too distracted," he thought. "Maybe I'm not paying enough attention." The breaking point came the day Madison accused him of canceling plans on her for the second weekend in a row. Ethan was confused. He remembered clearly that she had been the one to reschedule. But she insisted otherwise, almost offended by his denial. "You really don't remember?" she asked, staring at him with a mixture of pity and irritation. "You seriously need to work on your memory." That night, Ethan scrolled through their text messages to confirm what he thought he remembered. There it was, clear as day. Madison had been the one to cancel. That should have eased his mind. Instead, it made his stomach twist. Because if he hadn't checked, he would have believed her. And the realization that he could so easily be made to doubt himself frightened him more than he expected. So he began taking screenshots. Not out of spite, but out of a quiet desperation to anchor himself to something objective. A timeline he could rely on when his own perception felt shaky. Madison never knew about the screenshots, and Ethan didn't intend to use them for anything. He simply wanted to stay sane. But as the relationship progressed, the gaslighting escalated. Madison grew sharper, more dismissive, more controlling in the way she framed every disagreement. If Ethan confronted her gently, she accused him of being sensitive. If he tried to explain his perspective, she told him he was imagining things. The more she twisted reality, the more Ethan clung to his digital records. He started saving emails, voice messages, even tiny pieces of conversations, anything that could help him reassemble the truth when it inevitably got distorted. He didn't yet understand what was really happening. He didn't know Madison was preparing to push things much further. And he certainly didn't know that the screenshots he quietly collected to protect his own sanity would one day expose something far darker than manipulation. For now, all he knew was this: if he didn't document things, he would lose himself. Ethan never imagined that the unease he felt in his relationship would soon spill into his professional life. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, the kind where nothing felt out of place until everything suddenly did. He was working late at the office, reviewing a confidential proposal for a major client, when he noticed something odd. A detail in the competitor's newly announced campaign bore an uncanny resemblance to the data he had reviewed 2 weeks before. At first, he brushed it off as coincidence. But the more he compared the two, the more impossible that coincidence became. The language, the structure, even the projected metrics, too similar to be accidental. The only people who had access to this file were his immediate team at the company and Madison. A chill crept down his spine as he remembered a moment that once seemed harmless. Madison had casually walked past his desk at home one evening, glancing at the spreadsheet he had open. She asked about the project with a seemingly innocent curiosity. Ethan had given her a vague answer, thinking nothing of it. But now, that moment replayed in his head with an entirely new color. His suspicion deepened when he checked the activity logs on his work laptop. There were login attempts he didn't recognize, all syncing suspiciously close to the nights Madison had borrowed his laptop to watch something or send herself a file. Ethan's stomach tightened. But suspicion wasn't evidence. At least not yet. The confirmation came a week later. Ethan overheard a conversation during a networking event, 2 employees from the competitor whispering about a friend who fed them insider information. They didn't say a name, but they mentioned something that made the blood drain from Ethan's face. She said her boyfriend works at Harmon and Wells, one of them said. And he's clueless about how much she's helped us. There was no doubt anymore. Ethan confronted Madison that night, trying to stay calm, hopping against reason, for an explanation that made sense. But Madison didn't panic. She didn't deny it outright either. She simply tilted her head, crossed her arms, and said, "If anything happens, I'll just tell them you gave me the information. It'll be your word against mine." Her voice was cold, measured, terrifyingly confident. Ethan felt his chest tighten, but he forced himself to stand his ground. Madison's expression shifted. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I'm serious," she said. "No one will believe you over me." She said it like a fact, not a threat. Like she had already mapped out how to destroy him if he didn't comply. That was the moment Ethan realized just how dangerous she could be. He left the apartment that night, shaking, barely able to process what had happened. When he got to his car, he stared at the dashboard for a long time before the weight of everything hit him. The gaslighting, the manipulation, the lies, none of it had been random. Madison had been building control brick by brick, and he had been too blinded by doubt to see it. But now, it wasn't just emotional manipulation. This was corporate espionage. And she was prepared to pin all of it on him without hesitation. Ethan took a deep breath, pulled out his phone, and opened the folder he'd been keeping for months, screenshots, texts, timestamps. For the first time, he understood exactly why he had saved everything. He wasn't paranoid. He wasn't overreacting. He had been documenting a crime he didn't even know was happening. And now, he would need every single piece of it. Ethan didn't sleep the night he confronted Madison. He sat in his car until sunrise, replaying her words over and over again, each repetition carving deeper into his nerves. By the time morning came, he knew he had no choice. He gathered every file, every screenshot, every trace of suspicious activity he had documented, and went straight to the legal department at his company. His hands shook as he explained everything to the corporate attorney, but his voice stayed steady. He laid out the pattern of gaslighting, the leaked information, the threats. When he finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then the attorney said, "You did the right thing coming forward." Those words didn't bring comfort. They felt like a warning of what was about to follow. Within the hour, an internal investigation was opened. Ethan was advised to hire a personal lawyer as well, since Madison's retaliation was a very real risk. He did exactly that. His lawyer reviewed the messages and metadata he had saved and told him bluntly, "She's going to escalate. Be prepared." He switched apartments for a temporary stay. He changed passwords, bought new security locks, and even replaced his phone. He thought that might be enough, but he underestimated how fast Madison would strike back. Not even 3 days after he cut contact, an HR email landed in his inbox. It contained a formal complaint filed by Madison, accusing him of emotional abuse, coercion, and threatening behavior. Reading it felt surreal. The accusations were the exact opposite of reality, twisted so sharply they barely resembled real events. But Madison didn't stop there. She sent a long, frantic email to Ethan's department head, claiming she had proof that Ethan was responsible for the leak. She forwarded altered screenshots. She fabricated messages. And she wrote with the tone of a victim, bravely coming forward. For a brief moment, Ethan feared her lies might actually work. But he wasn't the same confused man she had manipulated for months. He had receipts. Every threat she sent was time-stamped. Every message was stored with metadata intact. Every login she made to his laptop had a corresponding digital trail. His lawyer advised him not to respond directly to any of her accusations. "Let the evidence speak," he said. And it did. When the company reviewed Ethan's submitted files, the contrast between authentic data and Madison's fabricated claims was stark. The timestamps didn't match. The file versions she provided were altered. And her messages contradicted themselves within minutes of each other. Still, Madison didn't back down. She doubled her accusations, sending long paragraphs filled with dramatic claims about Ethan's dangerous behavior. She even tried to file a police report against him, hoping it would corner him. But that attempt collapsed rapidly when the officer reviewing her report asked for supporting evidence she couldn't provide. Meanwhile, Ethan's legal team kept building. They reconstructed timelines. They verified phone records. They pulled security footage from his office, showing he was nowhere near the device during several of the supposed leaks. Piece by piece, the truth formed a clear, undeniable picture. Madison wasn't a victim. She was creating a narrative designed to destroy Ethan before he could expose her. But the one thing she never accounted for, the one flaw in her plan, was the fact that Ethan had documented everything from the very beginning. And now, those quiet, unnoticed screenshots had become the shield standing between him and a catastrophe she had tried to engineer. The deeper Ethan's legal team dug, the clearer it became that Madison's actions were not impulsive or emotional. They were calculated, methodical, and disturbingly familiar. His lawyer began contacting people from Madison's past, starting with 2 of her previous partners. Both men were hesitant at first, their voices tense and guarded. But once they learned Ethan was facing the same accusations they once had, the stories poured out. Each of them described the same pattern: manipulation, emotional provocation, sudden reversals of blame, and finally, false allegations when the relationship began to crumble. One of them confessed he had nearly lost his job because Madison had threatened to expose confidential information he never handled. The other said she filed a bogus harassment report when he tried to cut ties, only retracting it when he threatened to sue. Listening to their stories left Ethan numb. He had always known something was wrong, but he never imagined she had done this before, twice. What chilled him even more was how similar the timelines were. It was as if she operated from a script she'd refined over the years. While his legal team traced her past behaviors, the digital forensics expert working with Ethan analyzed the files Madison had tried to use against him. The inconsistencies were blatant. Metadata revealed several screenshots had been altered. Certain email timestamps had been manipulated using basic editing tools. Several files she claimed Ethan sent her were created on her own device, not his. Madison had assumed no one would look that closely. She had relied on drama, performance, and emotional chaos to cloud judgment. But under technical scrutiny, everything she fabricated unraveled almost instantly. The most damning discovery arrived through a recovered email thread. It was a conversation between Madison and a manager from the competing company, the very company benefiting from the leaked information. In the email, Madison discussed the bonus structure she was expecting in exchange for securing the deal. There was no ambiguity. She had been acting as an internal mole for months. Another message revealed she had intentionally timed the leaks to align with Ethan's project milestones, making it appear as though he was the one sabotaging his own work. When Ethan read the emails, he felt something collapse inside him. Not heartbreak, not anger, but a hollow kind of disbelief. He had lived with this person, trusted her, defended her, and somehow never realized how deeply she was entangled in deception. But the worst was yet to come. Madison had filed an official report claiming Ethan had physically assaulted her. It was the accusation she believed would ruin him instantly. She submitted photos of bruises on her arms and ribs, claiming Ethan grabbed her during an argument. For a few seconds, Ethan felt pure panic. Then his lawyer opened Madison's Instagram from the same date. There she was, smiling after a kickboxing session, proudly showing the very bruises she later used in the report. The caption read, "Training harder than ever, worth the bruises." That single post destroyed her claim in seconds. It proved she wasn't just lying, she was manufacturing evidence. When confronted with this contradiction during the investigation, Madison tried to delete the post. But it was too late. Screenshots existed. Backup servers existed. Her pattern of deception was fully exposed. By the end of the review, the legal team had compiled a folder so extensive, so meticulously documented, that Madison's entire narrative disintegrated. Ethan didn't feel triumph. He felt relief mixed with exhaustion, the weight of months of manipulation finally lifting off his chest. For the first time, he understood that what he had endured was not a toxic relationship. It was a calculated campaign designed to exploit him emotionally, professionally, and legally. And now, with the truth laid bare, the balance of power had finally shifted. The deposition began in a narrow conference room that felt colder than it should have. Ethan sat on one side of the table with his attorney, while Madison faced them from across the room. She walked in confident, almost casual, as if the months of accusations and fallout had never touched her. But the moment the recorder clicked on, her demeanor shifted. The attorney asked her to explain her timeline of events, starting from the date she claimed Ethan leaked company information. Her voice was smooth at first. She insisted Ethan had willingly provided her with files, claiming he felt overwhelmed and wanted her help. She said she only ever tried to support him. But the first crack appeared when the attorney asked why the files she submitted as evidence was created on her own device. Madison blinked, hesitated, and then said she couldn't remember. The attorney pressed further, presenting metadata showing the file had been edited hours before she sent it to the competitor. Her explanation shifted again. She said Ethan must have sent her a corrupted version, and she fixed the formatting. Ethan felt his jaw tense as he watched her create new lies on the spot, layering them on top of each other. But her unraveling had only just begun. When asked about her accusations of abuse, Madison straightened up and delivered a rehearsed, emotional speech about how she had feared for her safety. She described scenes that had never happened, using dramatic language as if she were performing for an audience. But the attorney quietly slid printed screenshots across the table, images of her kickboxing post, dated and time-stamped perfectly. The bruises she claimed Ethan gave her were clearly visible in the gym photo, in a mirror selfie she had taken hours earlier. Madison's face drained of color. She tried to speak, then stopped, then tried again. She claimed the dates were wrong. Then she said the photos were old. Then she said she might have mixed up the days. Every attempt contradicted the one before it. The attorney moved on to her previous relationships. At first, Madison denied ever accusing anyone else of misconduct. But then statements from her ex-partners were introduced, calm, detailed accounts that mirrored Ethan's experience almost word for word. Madison's leg started bouncing beneath the table. Her voice grew sharper, defensive, cracking under the pressure. Finally, the attorney brought out the email thread between Madison and the competitor. Her reaction was instant panic. She claimed it wasn't her email. Then she said it was her email, but taken out of context. Then she said she had been joking. But nothing about the emails looked like a joke. The tone was direct, transactional, and incriminating. There was even a reference to the bonus she expected once the deal was secured. At this point, Madison's lawyer leaned toward her, whispering urgently. Her mask was slipping. Her voice trembled as she tried to correct her story for the 5th time. And that was when the attorney asked the question that finally cornered her. If Ethan was abusing you, sabotaging his own job, and threatening you, why did you continue living with him for months? Why did you send him affectionate messages the same nights you claim he harmed you? Madison froze. There was no script left, no story to hide behind. She stayed silent for several seconds, long, heavy seconds that echoed in the room. And then, with her jaw tight and eyes unfocused, she muttered the truth she had tried so hard to bury. He was going to propose, she said quietly. When I found the ring, I panicked. I couldn't let things get serious. I wasn't done with my plans. Her lawyer closed his eyes in defeat. Ethan felt the world tilt, not from shock, but from the confirmation of what he had feared all along. Madison hadn't simply manipulated him. She had used him, plotted around him. And when the plan no longer served her, she tried to destroy him. The deposition ended without drama, just a heavy, inevitable silence. But the outcome was clear. Madison had destroyed her own credibility. And the truth, documented meticulously by Ethan, stood unshakable against every lie she had built. The civil trial began under bright fluorescent lights that made everything feel harsher than reality. Ethan sat quietly beside his attorney, reminding himself to breathe as the courtroom filled with the low hum of shuffling papers and muted conversations. Across the room, Madison walked in with a confidence that seemed almost rehearsed, as if she still believed she could perform her way out of the truth. But the moment the judge entered, the atmosphere shifted into something sharp and focused. Opening statements were brief, but they set the tone instantly. Madison's side argued she was a victim of manipulation, claiming Ethan had fabricated evidence to deflect blame for leaking company secrets. Her lawyer spoke with conviction, weaving a narrative designed to paint her as a vulnerable woman fighting a powerful system. But when Ethan's attorney stood, the entire room seemed to lean forward. He laid out the case not with theatrics, but with precision, methodical, chronological, and grounded in hard data. There is what was said, he told the judge, and then there is what actually happened. Today, we will look only at what can be proven. And then the evidence began. The first exhibit was a timeline board filled with dates, messages, and email logs. Each entry was backed by metadata, server records, or third-party verification. Ethan watched Madison's posture stiffen as her fabricated claims collapsed one by one. Her emails accusing him of abuse were time-stamped at times when Ethan was confirmed to be at work, in meetings, or on video calls. Her screenshots supposedly showing him sending confidential files were proven altered. An expert highlighted mismatched pixel data and inconsistent file signatures that even a layperson could spot. The courtroom murmured when the kickboxing photo was introduced. It was shown side by side with the images she later submitted as injuries caused by Ethan. The dates matched perfectly, and the captions were undeniable. Her abuse allegations dissolved instantly. Then came the most devastating evidence of the trial, the emails between Madison and the competitor. Her messages discussing the bonus and timing the releases landed with the weight of a confession. She looked down, jaw clenched, hands trembling subtly in her lap. Her attorney tried to argue context, but the judge cut him off. There is no reasonable interpretation of these emails that supports your client's claims, he said. From there, Madison's collapse was rapid. Her deposition transcripts were read aloud. The contradictions were humiliating, each version of her story contradicting the last, each lie exposed with brutal clarity. Ethan didn't feel satisfaction as he listened. He felt tired, bone-deep tired. He just wanted the nightmare to end. When it was finally time for closing arguments, Madison's side tried to pivot toward emotional appeal. They spoke about her fear, her trauma, her confusion. But those words floated emptily in the air, unsupported by a single piece of verified evidence. Ethan's attorney ended with a simple sentence. Facts do not require sympathy. They require honesty. The judge deliberated for less than an hour. When he returned, the room fell silent. He ruled decisively in Ethan's favor. Madison was ordered to pay $185,500 in damages and cover Ethan's full legal fees. Her actions were formally recognized as malicious, deceptive, and intentionally harmful. She was also flagged in industry circles for breaching corporate confidentiality, effectively shutting her out of the marketing field. Ethan exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. The weight that had been pressing on his chest lifted slowly, like fog burning away in sunlight. Even as Madison stood frozen, her future collapsing around her, Ethan felt no triumph. Just relief. Because the truth had held. Because the documentation had saved him. And because, finally, the war she had started was over. Ethan stepped out of the courthouse into the late afternoon light, feeling as if the world had expanded around him. For months, his life had been reduced to fear, paperwork, and the constant dread that a lie might overpower the truth. Now, for the first time, he could breathe without bracing for impact. He walked slowly toward the street, letting the sounds of traffic and distant chatter pull him back into ordinary life. There were people to call, messages to answer, a future to rebuild, but none of it felt urgent. What mattered was that he had survived. Madison's downfall didn't comfort him. It only reminded him how fragile trust could be, and how easily a person's reality could be rewritten by someone determined enough. But it also reminded him that preparation had saved him. Every screenshot, every saved message, every time-stamped log, each one became a thread that held the truth together when everything else tried to tear it apart. As he walked away, he promised himself he would never apologize for being cautious again. And for the first time in a long while, he felt something like peace settling back into his life.